Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Farrell. I'm the Program Officer for the Triangle Research Libraries Network. I'm also the chair of the Community Engagement Team for Project ReShare. And it's noon, says my clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So just a quick note, I mentioned in the chat, but this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be shared with ReShare's news and community list, as well as it will be posted on projectreshare.org. If you have questions throughout today's webinar, please ask them using the Zoom Q&A feature, not put them in the chat. Things can get a bit lost in the Zoom chat, so we ask that people put your questions in the Q&A. And at the end of all of our presentations and sessions, we will go through all the Q&A and answer those questions. So just to touch a bit on the agenda today, so we're in the welcome portion right now. And then up next, we'll have Jill Morris and Pam Jones share their experience of adopting ReShare as consortiums. And then we'll have 2 practitioner experiences for about 20 minutes. And then Kristen Wilson will provide a service provider relationship description. And then we'll close the formal sections with how to get involved with the ReShare community. And as I mentioned, we'll close with Q&A. So please, for any of our presenters, please put in your questions into the Q&A throughout today's session. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jill and Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam Jones. I'm the Executive Director of ConnectNY. We're a small academic consortium with 12 private institutions as members right now. We started in 2001 as an idea, a brainchild of 5 academic libraries that wanted to share resources. And at the time, Innovative's InReach system was the one that created a union catalog for folks and also had a circulation module attached to it that would allow you to do resource sharing within your system. So we've been using that until we recently migrated to ReShare. I became executive director in 2015, but had been a board member I was a library director at Medaille and we were members. So 2016, after I became ED, we did an environmental scan. We had a working group, did sort of an environmental scan of all technologies being used in ConnectNY. What else was out there that was a possible resource sharing tool for us, or could we do things differently? That group posed a bunch of questions that the board then decided we could work with a consultant to do sort of a more formal scan and determine some options for us. And the outcome of that, basically at the time in 2017, we were looking at moving the entire consortium to a shared system using Alma or to staying on InReach. We also looked at IDS, we looked at Relay. And at the end of the day, the board decided we'd stick with InReach for the time being and keep watching the resource sharing market. I don't know, Jill, what was it? 2018, we started talking, right, about something that wasn't vendor operated. And so I got involved with those talks, and eventually in 2019, when they put out the membership call, my director said, yes, we must join. And yes, things started to percolate. My board took the initiative to pull the Band-Aid off and move from something we've been on for 20 years almost to trying something brand new. So that's kind of how we got here. It's been interesting. We did 3 months of exiting off InReach while we were trying to implement, we were implementing ReShare, working with IndexData. The process went well. You know, we had some hiccups with NSIP because our Sierra libraries didn't have NSIP, the API. So they put it in, we got it all working. Everything's working now. So, you know, and honestly, we set a go live date for mid-August and we went live September 1st. So to me, that's a big win-win. And when you're trying something new, to come live that close to date is pretty phenomenal. All right, Jill, I'm gonna let you take over, and then we can chat back and forth.
All right, great. Thanks. Hi, I'm Jill Morris. I'm the Executive Director of the PALCI Consortium. We are 74 academic and research libraries in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and West Virginia. So rather large group of a regional consortium that was really founded in resource sharing. And Easy Borrow is the sort of one of our core programs and services that we offer to our members. We've had more than 50 libraries participating in ReShare for more than 15 years now. We've provided services to the consortium. And we've got a diverse membership, so we support libraries on at least 12 different ILS types that I know of at this moment, which can make it a real challenge. But our consortium is committed to sharing their materials with each other, and that's one of the biggest reasons that libraries join PALCI in the first place, is the connection to other institutions and the ability to share those collections and not to need to maintain all of them on site. So Easy Borrow is our consortial borrowing program. As I said, we are serving more than 50 libraries. We actually have added one more in the last year, and we expect to add another 15 or so over the course of the next 12 months. Our decision to move into the ReShare community really sort of came about in 2017-18, following a very similar timeline to what Pam described in the ConnectNY consortium. We were all sort of looking at our options and thinking about, what does the next generation of resource sharing really need to look like to support the types of sharing that we felt we were going to need to do in order to sustain our ability to share resources and to follow through on our mission and our vision for our organizations. This is about the same time that the Big Ten was releasing its white paper on next generation resource sharing as well. So all of our various consortia we're really talking to each other quite a bit, I think, about, what does this need to look like? How do we need to be able to share in future? And at the same time, we had a lot of concerns about what was happening in the marketplace, just in terms of market consolidation. We were really worried about lack of choice and also inability to influence the products that we were using and to innovate in the ways that we were hoping to. We just weren't seeing the ability to do that in our existing solutions. And we wanted to be able to make sure that anything that we made an investment in the future was going to be something that we could continue to own, and we wouldn't be sort of hamstrung in the ways that we had been in the past. So we didn't sort of want to repeat the same choices that we'd made in the past and have the same set of issues a couple years down the road. We really wanted to make a difference and figure out what the long-term solution needed to look like. So in, following sort of the same timeline that Pam's group did, maybe just slightly after you actually, I think, Pam, we formed a group called the Working Group on the Future of Resource Delivery. And that group met twice a month at least throughout 2017 and early 2018 to address those shared concerns. They, like Pam's group, did some environmental scanning and a lot of thinking about what was needed for the next generation of Easy Borrow, thinking about sharing of collections in its broadest sense, how we would do that inside of our consortium, how we might partner with other consortia to help fill those needs that our consortium had. And they came up with a set of requirements based on that effort. Like I said, the importance of open source community ownership was just really, really critical in that we didn't want to repeat sort of the same mistakes or same constraints that we had been under in the past. We absolutely needed something vendor neutral. We knew we needed to improve upon our current level of service. Affordability was also very front and center in our minds as we thought about this. And we really wanted to focus in on the ability to influence our space and to choose the service provider that made the most sense for our consortium. Standards and interoperability protocols were just really, really critical for a consortium like ours, where we have so many different types of ILSs to support, so many different configurations, technical solutions within different libraries, and knowing that we needed to be able to sit in the center and connect all of those disparate libraries together. So we knew all of those things were really critical. And then on top of that, we had maybe a 3 to 4 year timeline that we were trying to accomplish for any changes that we wanted to make to our environment. So knowing all of that and knowing sort of what our wish list was around trying to do cross-consortial lending in the future, we wanted to be able to support innovation and partner for shared vision. All of that sort of taken together really influenced our decision to move to ReShare. Our working group presented this vision and sort of criteria to our board, and they unanimously approved an investment in moving to ReShare. So the first thing that we did was really just invest in the community itself, because we recognized that it wouldn't happen unless there were people sitting around the table making those investments and creating the types of tools and community that we said we wanted in the first place. So our board, I think, had the foresight and vision to support that effort at the ground level, made a big investment in supporting user experience design and development, $100,000, as an investment in that long-term vision for future. And we hoped that would inspire others to come along with us on that journey. And I'm really glad that we did. I think now that we've gone live, Maureen will talk about this a little bit more in a few moments. But now that it's live and in production, that investment, we're already seeing that coming to fruition. And we've gathered up, another 28 or 29 members in the ReShare community overall to date. So that's a little bit about sort of our decision to move into the ReShare community. And I'll turn it back over to you, Pam, if you've got anything else to add after that.
Well, I think, yeah, true. For us too, a lot of the same concerns and wishes. We wanted something that was cost effective. We wanted something that worked a little easier. InReach was difficult if you were not an innovative library. There's an extra fee. There's a lot of, it doesn't work the same way. There was a lot of frustration with that. And we were losing members because if they were migrating systems off of Innovative, they weren't going to pay to go back on. So for us, we needed a solution that was something different, that we could have much more equitable cost for everybody, and that it wasn't isn't going to be too hard for us to implement and maintain. And this seemed to check all the boxes for us, and working with IndexData has been really good. So, and getting more involved with the community. We have committees set up that are working with it, and we're figuring it out. I like it.
And same here. I think the implementation process, Maureen will talk a little bit more about that from the EasyBorrow perspective in a few moments. But I think one thing that consortial leaders and library leaders need to think about is, like, what is that investment, that initial investment in community and open source look like and mean for our institutions? And with any new software implementation, there is a pain of transition that comes along with that. There's an investment of time, right? And both of us have very small staffs here at PALCI. We've got 4. Pam, you've got 1.5, right?
Yeah, we're basically 2 half-time employees. Yeah. So
right, and so it's a lot to make a jump to a new system. But I think one thing that we as consortial leaders talk a lot about is, what does that future need to look like, and what investments do we need to make now, so that we don't have the same set of problems 5-10 years from now? Where do we need to invest our energy and thinking about how do we move dollars around so that we are in a different place 5-10 years ago, and hopefully a much better one that supports our libraries in doing what they need to do. So that was something that I think we've talked a fair amount about. But it's something you need to go into these types of activities with your eyes wide open, I think.
Yeah, it's different. It is different, but I think it's really worth it. I'm impressed with the roadmap, the ideas that the community has come up with and wants to move it. And, and for us too, cross-consortial capabilities is huge. Jill and I have been talking about this for the last 5 years, 6 years. And, make it easy. I mean, we are actually geographically located near each other. So how do we, and also can ConnectNY pull in more folks, more libraries that are interested in using ReShare and being part of this community and a bigger community to resource share. The opportunities with the shared index, I think, we've started discussing shared print, resource sharing, things like that. There's a lot of possibility. And yeah, eyes wide open. What things are you most interested in for your consortium, and where do you want to put the money to help, or the work to help develop it? So that's exciting. To me, that's very exciting.
Yeah, all of the potential for building off of the sort of core set of services, I think is a really exciting sort of way to get involved in ReShare. If there are things that your library or your consortium is really interested in, there's that potential to take leadership in different aspects of the community and to come in and make a difference in the product roadmap, because we're not beholden to sort of commercial interests. We're really there together, solving a problem together and figuring out how to resource it appropriately. And I think for us here at PALCI, that was something exciting, to be able to take our ideas and work together with other partners in the community who were of the same mind, and be able to work on them together, figure out ways of building those structures. I think the community structure inside of ReShare is one of its greatest strengths. We have this really great group of libraries and consortia and commercial developers who are working together very transparently on how do we get ReShare where it needs to be to support this vision for resource sharing that I think many of us have wanted to see for a long time. And so I think the opportunities to get involved will probably be discussed a little bit later, and this is the first of a series of meetings of the ReShare community. And I think that's one of the things that we'll talk a lot about, is just the various opportunities to be engaged in actually designing that product roadmap and prioritizing what comes next. Our consortium has really been excited, I think, about all of the possibilities that come along with the community structure that is present here and the governance opportunities. So yeah, that was something else that I think our consortium thought a lot about as we were making decisions to join the community and then to implement the software as well.
I think too, going forward, given that PALCI and ConnectNY took this dive into the pool, we can definitely provide sort of an insight as to what to expect. We didn't know, we knew we were getting a new product, you saw the demos and all that, but something brand new doesn't work exactly until you get your mouse in there and work, you don't know. And I think all in all, it's been really positive, but I know there's been some frustration points, with staff that are trying to learn it and navigate it, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I think the staying focused in on those development opportunities, we're already seeing some new features and functionality that we here at PALCI didn't have in the past. We never had the shared catalog, for example, or the aggregated index. So that's a huge gain for the PALCI community, to be able to have a better understanding of what we collectively hold and to make decisions based on that information, and also to share resources with that information is pretty powerful, I think, for a group where you are, on a series of disparate ILSs and didn't have a mechanism for really doing that in the past, except for one-by-one searching. So now there's this mechanism and all of these possibilities that you can start to entertain, and including the idea of going beyond, building on those partnerships, because we know that, within our own consortium, we're able to share, but there are so many other opportunities to set up reciprocal arrangements with lots of other groups too, that we want to be able to do that, but not have 10 different systems that have to manage those transactions. And the fact that ReShare is built on the latest standards like ISO 18626 means that trading requests really doesn't have to be that complex. We can trade them in ways that allow us to go across institutions and consortia even, and that makes perfect sense based on kind of where we are today in the environment. So
it gives consortial members too that freedom to have their own choice of staying with a vendor for an ILS or moving to another one. It's different than when you have everybody's on the same system for consortium. And for our group, it's always been important to have their own, but the resource sharing, we want it to be pretty seamless and easy to operate. And this seems to be hitting all the buttons.
The thing I really appreciate too, I think, is just the opportunity to choose between service providers of our choice. So we're not limited. We could self-host if someday we wanted to. We're working with a wonderful partner now in IndexData. We've got some really great commercial partners developing the software knowledge integration, and the limits are not there in the same way that they are with commercial proprietary products, where there is just one choice for that specific product, and here we have options. And my hope is that over time we've got a number of options that allows us to choose who's going to be the best fit for our consortium based on any number of factors that may come into play, and dependent on sort of the systems that you're there to support within your own environment. So I really love that aspect of this as well. So I think we're maybe at the end of our time. We may have gone over. I'm looking to Kristen or Kelly to tell us to get the hook, but I think we should probably wrap now and go to our next speakers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill and Pam. So we're going to move on to some practitioner experience. So Maureen, do you want to start sharing your screen?
Let me unmute myself. Okay. Okay. Does everybody see ReShare at Dickinson College, I hope? I'll get started. My name's Maureen O'Brien Dermott. I'm the Associate Director for Access Services at Dickinson College. Just a little background about Dickinson. We're a small 4-year residential college located in South Central Pennsylvania, and we serve roughly 2,300 full-time students and 900 faculty and staff. We've been part of the PALCI Consortium since the late 90s and joined the resource sharing program in early 2000s. This is the second system change I've been through with EasyBorrow. And I gotta tell you, this is the easiest transition and much more pleasant than the experience we had previously. In my opinion, the success of this migration to ReShare rests on the shoulders of our PALCI project managers, Gretchen Gigan, I hope that's pronounced correctly, and James Robinson for their ongoing communication and tremendous, if not Herculean, effort to keep us on task and on time. Of course, IndexData team, the beta testers, and everyone involved in Project ReShare deserves some credit for this. So why is EasyBorrow important to us? Well, we have about 60 to 65% of our borrowing and lending fills come through EasyBorrow. It's a completely unmediated system, and it's super fast, so everybody seems to like it. The users really do love the speed, but in our previous system, they didn't really necessarily care for the search interface. Initially, they complained about the authentication process. Our ILS authenticates on an ID number rather than a username. So patrons were constantly telling me they weren't able to log into the system when in fact they just weren't using the correct authenticator. And this was really frustrating, not only for students and faculty, but of course our staff. IT folks worked their magic and created an overlay that pushed the correct information into the previous system. So, you know, they did their magic and fixed the problem. The other problem that we had was with the search interface. Users really didn't like the search interface of our previous system. It was slow to load our results, and the pages would often jump as results were loading. So, and also the formats wouldn't display as an obvious thing. We had a lot of people requesting things for e-resources, and we weren't able to share those. But obviously our patrons were satisfied and continued to use it for most of their book loans. So Dickinson was not part of the beta testing group in EasyBorrow. So library staff prepared for the implementation by checking out the ReShare website. I think it's great. Honestly, we watched and rewatched the demo videos and explored the demo site, which is excellent since you could actually get in there and submit requests and process them through and just get a feel for it. That early preparation by staff alleviated much of the anxiety that goes with implementing a new system. As the project timeline rolled on, we were fortunate to hit all of those key milestones with, I would say, little problem. We confirmed that our OAI publishing profiles in ALMA were set up correctly. You know, our holdings were going to load in the shared index correctly, so that was a plus. We also were able to get our single sign-on working. So, and that we just had a few back and forth with the IT people on campus here, but it's working great. And, you know, we are in business. So the brief testing phase that our project managers created also was really key for us in the timeline. During this phase, consortia partners and our library staff were able to discover some of the little bugs and issues. Some of them mostly small, but you know, we had something with our pool slips that really needed to be corrected before we went live. During this testing phase, we also had the opportunity to develop our student staff workflow and the documentation that would go along with that. Our communication plan for our campus community started late in the spring semester. We used a variety of communication avenues, starting first with a monthly admin report. We also added an EasyBorrow tab to our service lib guide. This was a guide we developed during COVID that gave our users information about services and updates. So everybody kind of got used to using it, and I think we're going to keep it. But since our go live was going to happen during the summer break when faculty and students weren't on campus, we also made sure that we put notices in campus newsletters and announcements, and also sent emails to our faculty users through our library liaison program. After going live on August 12th, I personally reached out to a couple of the power users, faculty power users I knew that were on campus to get some feedback from them. The faculty I spoke to were all positive in their response. They liked how things displayed. They didn't see any really big issues with it, with the exception of not being able to see request history. So I hope that's on the roadmap. So what has worked for us? Well, I mean, we had an extremely smooth migration, and really, I think it comes down to the communication. Our consortia's ReShare implementation team was transparent and thorough. Practitioners had many opportunities to ask questions, make suggestions, and brainstorm solutions. We think the system is intuitive. There's a new update app that has been key to our ability to streamline our processes and train student staff to process requests. We have way less processing errors than we had with our previous system. Communication with our EasyBorrow partners has improved, or can actually improve. There's a built-in messaging feature in ReShare that allows you to make comments, but we haven't really had this feature in anything else, so it might take the whole consortium some time to get on board with looking for notes and information within a request. And we also have some improved request tracking in the audit trail. Ultimately, this feature will give our practitioners a greater understanding of the system, but also give them the ability to answer our patrons' questions about where their request is in the process. So what kind of improvements are there? Well, I think for me, the biggest one that I'd like to see happen is an improvement with the Iliad integration. There has been a development of a system add-on that we've implemented, but we're seeing very few requests being pushed into the ReShare interface from this add-on. We're getting turnaways that are kind of weird for me, which say too many hits to be able to submit a request in ReShare. So, I mean, to me, that's just something's wrong, and I'd like to see that fixed. There should also be some improvement in index matching. A lot has been done on this front, but I think that there's more that can be done. I don't want to see requests in my supply queue that are already in a can't supply status when it's sitting on my shelf. I want to be able to give that to somebody else. And also the user interface tools, like I mentioned before, being able to have request history is really important to my users. So for Dickinson, the migration was fairly easy. I'm really happy that we've moved to this. We have not had the experience that maybe some of my colleagues in EasyBorrow have, but you know, I'm available to talk to anybody about the the implementation. Here's my contact information, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. So now Liz King and Michele Matthews are going to speak.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending and learning a little bit more about ReShare and our experiences with this. So myself, I'm Liz King. I'm the Associate Director for Library Information Services at RPI, and I'll be presenting with my colleague, Michele Matthews. Michele is the Manager for Public Services, and she's also the Head of Interlibrary Loan Services. So we'll be taking turns telling you a little bit about RPI's experience implementing ReShare. So you can see a little bit about RPI here on the slide. We're a private college in the Capital Region. And to give you an idea about our potential ReShare usage, since the start of this semester, we've had 94 book requests through interlibrary loan. And our workflow is we would cross-check those book requests with ConnectNY libraries before filling them through interlibrary loan. And then if they're available through a ConnectNY partner, we then currently, and Michele will talk a little bit about workflows later, but we currently redirect our patrons to a separate request process for ReShare. So given that workflow, one thing we like to point out is we have a pretty small library staff, and we have 5 staff members who are involved with managing ReShare, but only 2 of those staff members handle the day-to-day tasks. So our primary employee who handles ReShare during the day also covers the lending side of ILL, and she covers both sides of the ReShare request, so both request and supply. So it is possible to manage ReShare and implement ReShare with minimal staff with hands on the process. So the communication in terms of implementing ReShare, the communication with our staff and our users, staff knew about the upcoming switch to ReShare pretty far in advance. we had recently migrated library systems, and we went live in early 2020. So early 2020, what turned out to be a difficult time to go live with a new library system. So I mean, it always is, right? But with the new system, we were not able to continue using InReach. And we also knew about ConnectNY York's upcoming switch to ReShare. So given those two circumstances, our ConnectNY York services were put on pause until ReShare went live. So that pause in the ConnectNY York services created a sort of unique set of circumstances when it came time to communicating the launch of ReShare, because it was also synonymously the restart of ConnectNY York lending for our staff and users. So the way that we began our implementation process was we identified 2 staff members from our existing interlibrary loan staff to handle the ReShare requests. And this allowed a limited number of staff to familiarize themselves with the new software. And it allowed for a more controlled environment as the new workflows were developed and tested. We found that the workflows, that our internal workflows might change daily depending on what worked and what didn't work. And it was easier with 2 staff members handling ReShare to communicate with just those 2 staff members the changes on a day-to-day basis. And again, the day-to-day changes were internal. So we used Slack. We currently use Slack as an internal staff communication method. And we had an internal Slack channel where we were able to communicate with each other about the different ReShare workflows. Now, on the other hand, communicating with the library users, that was pretty easy. We updated our library website. We added instructions for using the shared catalog and submitting requests. We added an announcement to our library's website news page, and then that automatically feeds institution-wide morning mail queue, and that goes to all of our users through their email. So we were able to get the word out pretty easily to the users. So a little bit about implementation in terms of managing the change that came along with that. We found that and remember, this is why you get the practitioner experience, right? We found that the biggest challenge in terms of managing change was communicating to the library staff who would be responsible for ReShare. We had most library staff in the public services department responsible for sort of an equitable portion of interlibrary loan processes. And so we had to make sure to communicate who would be working with ReShare, but also assuring everybody that as soon as the ReShare workflows became more standardized and gelled a little bit, we would be able to include more staff in the process, because the staff really like working with the resource sharing. So they wanted to make sure that everybody would have a chance to work on it as it became more standardized. So there were also some changes in terms of the physical workflow behind the circulation desk, which is something to keep in mind when you think about the actual flow of materials behind the desk or where you keep the items for resource sharing. And what we found was that open communication through that Slack channel was a good way to navigate any learning curves, practicing any workflows, or communicating internally, because we were working with staff from 2 different departments plus a systems admin staff with varying schedules from early morning to late night. And the Slack channel kind of allowed for us to catch up in the, I was a late bird and Michele was an early bird, and it allowed us to kind of catch up as we were figuring out new things with the system. And speaking of the early bird, I'm going to pass this over to Michele to talk a little bit about some of the workflows that we changed to.
Hi, I'm Michele, and our workflows changed dramatically because our new library system was WMS, and ReShare does not play nice yet with WMS. So any borrowing request, we created a workflow to use Iliad to give the request to our patrons. So when someone requests something from ReShare, we put the request into Iliad, and then that's how we're able to check it out to them, because it didn't work with WMS on the borrowing end. It works very well on the lending end, but not on the borrowing end. So our systems ID person, George Bigger, and myself, we worked together and wrote a new workflow for everyone to be able to put the requests into Iliad. So that's our, right now, every request has to go into Iliad. We have put the add-on, the ReShare add-on on, but it's still not working properly so that we can send it over to ReShare. If a person requests a book in Iliad and a ConnectNY library owns it, we send them to ReShare. And then the request is canceled. And if the book is filled, the request is reinitiated with all, and we put in all the requests. Like if it's coming from Vassar, we put the number in, we put the call number in, and then it's checked out to the patron via Iliad. So it's a little bit more complicated here than it would be at one of the other libraries. Versus InReach, well, everything worked in the catalog at the time. So that's where we are. We're hoping that eventually this will all work together. The features that we really like are the audit trail, because it's very easy to see where things are. George is calling me right now. You can hear my phone ringing. And we use this ReShare messaging feature when they need to communicate with other ConnectNY libraries. And now I'm going to send it back to Liz.
Thanks, Michele, and shout out to George. You must have known we were talking about him. So really just the final thing we wanted to mention was just the kind of wish list features that we have. And they've kind of already been touched on here, but really we've really enjoyed using ReShare overall as a system. And we know that we'll be able to use it at some point with the NCIP enabled workflow. And I'll say that like I know what it means. But George talks to me a lot about the NCIP enabled workflow with ReShare and how that's going to make a really big difference in terms of not having to use Iliad to check out the items. And so we're really looking forward to that. And then also another thing George is working on that Michele mentioned, he's testing out that ReShare add-on for Iliad to where we can transfer the requests within the systems. And so it's really just the integrations between systems that we're looking forward to. But we've been really pleased with the system itself. So I think I'm going to pass the baton to Kristen Wilson. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Liz. So for the next portion of the webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit about the service provider perspective in all of this. And I guess I should also introduce myself. I'm Kristen Wilson. I work at IndexData, and I'm a project manager and analyst there. I'm also a librarian. And so I've been the project coordinator for ReShare as a community project, but I also worked very closely with both PALCI and CNY on their implementations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what things are looking like now that we're in production. And so I kind of wanted to start off by talking about what, kind of the workflows that we're developing to support ReShare as still a community that's developing software, but also a product that is in production and being used by real libraries. And so the way that I see this kind of happening is that there's kind of two tracks that are developing a little bit in parallel, and you can kind of see this in this illustration on each side of the screen. And so I think, as you've heard, now that we have libraries in production, we are of course going to have support needs for those libraries. And that can, that's going to flow primarily from each individual library through the consortium at first. So I think both consortia are using a model where, the consortium has somebody kind of looking at issues as a first line of support. And, support needs can really go in a lot of different directions. And so, sometimes it's just a matter of understanding how the system does something maybe that's different than the old way of doing it and, just getting some instructions. But sometimes those support requests, the consortium has to pass them on to us as a service provider to take a look at those. And again, there's kind of a couple different directions those requests can go at that point. There are things that kind of comes down here to the bottom here that really fall on us as a service provider and have to do with our relationship with our customers. And those are things like hosting, configurations, setting up individual integrations for a specific library. I guess also in there is kind of the implementation process on the front end of getting people set up initially. And so that's all very much the service provider role. And then on the other side of things, there's the community. So the community is also identifying priorities for ReShare, and they can be a little bit different from library support needs in that they might be a little bit higher level, maybe a little bit more focused on where the project wants to go long term, or about getting new implementers on board. And so that can tend to be a different pool of issues. And so again, we can kind of feed those into development issues. Oh, and I sort of forgot to say this for the service provider side. Again, we can also have things that become development issues because they're not related to one specific customer and their local setup, but they're something to do with the ReShare software itself that needs to be changed or improved or added. And so we've heard a little bit about that from some of the practitioners today. Thinking about those integrations is one point where we definitely could see some improvements, and some of those have to do with setup, some of them have to do with changes to the software. So in the end, what we're seeing as kind of our model going forward is that we have a lot of issues kind of flowing into this pool of community development issues for ReShare, and that those can be enhancements and bugs. So on one side, we've got the community, we've got the things that need to be done for the project as a whole. And then on the other side, we've got kind of the libraries, the implementers, the support provider in IndexData working on kind of the local side of things. And so it's been, I think now that we're in production, it's really helped us sort of sort out this model and figure out, start to figure out anyway, how we're going to be working on this going forward. And so what I wanted to talk about a little bit is just sort of the experience of the implementers in terms of what has presented a challenge, and then how we're going to continue evolving and improving ReShare into the future. And so I guess I kind of covered this a little bit already, but the service provider role for us at IndexData, we really do host and manage the ReShare environment for everyone. And we host in Amazon Web Services, AWS. And so, it's totally on us to make sure that the system stays up and that service is available. As Jill mentioned, another service provider could come along and do that as well, or a consortium could self-host. So there are those different options. Managing and co-managing the implementation process. I mean, we worked very closely with both Jill and James and Gretchen at PALCI, and with Pam and Jill and a lot of the practitioners at CNY to manage the implementations. And that was, it involved a lot. There's harvesting catalog records, setting up all of the local ILS integrations, working on the Iliad integration. So there was a lot there that we kind of helped shepherd people through that process. We also do help with the third-party integrations, testing and providing support for specific customer implementations of those. We provide second-tier support and triage. So as issues flow to us, we can take a look at them if the consortium's not able to resolve it on their own, and kind of get those sorted into the right bin. We definitely address hosting and configuration issues going forward. And we also try to work closely with the community on development issues. And I think that's really what the key thing is here, is that ReShare is a community project. And so decisions about roadmap and direction going forward are really made by the community. So they're not made by us, IndexData, as a service provider, and they're not dictated in isolation by any of the implementers either, but all of us have a voice in that process. And so from the community side of things, what we've really been trying to do now that we have libraries in production is document all of the bugs and enhancements that have come out of this process. And everyone has been very positive, and I really appreciate that people have had a good experience working with ReShare and with IndexData. But I also do want to be transparent that the process has certainly revealed a lot about the system, just things that can be improved and done better, and some bugs. And I think there's almost no way to get that kind of experience other than to go live and just really see what shakes out. So that has been a challenge in some ways for people I know, but I think it's also just a really invaluable service to ReShare as a whole. And so I appreciate that, the libraries have been kind of dealing with all that. So the community is kind of documenting all of that, prioritizing, outstanding user stories and features. We're going to be working on a new roadmap. We have a development team that will be implementing and testing functionality, maintaining the code. And we also maintain some user documentation. And we've had, especially PALCI has been really helped out with creating some of that user documentation as well. So that's been a big help. So it really is a community effort, and it will continue to be even as we start to operationalize it a little more. And so I did want to highlight some of the enhancement priorities that have come up from the implementations, just to give you a sense of the types of things that people are finding. And so this is not a complete list for PALCI or CNY, but it's just some highlights of the types of things that people are bringing up. So improving the shared index matching process, that definitely got mentioned already today. I think that's going to be a pretty high priority. And that really is when we build the consortial catalog for each consortium, kind of matching and deduplicating records so that we don't have so many duplicates. So that's something we really want to improve. And then a lot of these are kind of, the things that make the system take it from just being usable to being really pleasant to use. So, being able to suspend NSIP, which is the ILS integration on a per request basis if something's not working, automatically forwarding stale requests on. There's been a lot of talk about ILLiad. And right now we have the ILLiad add-on, which sends requests from ILLiad into ReShare, but we'd like to kind of do that the other way too, where requests can start in ReShare and then be passed on to ILLiad or potentially other systems as well. Being able to manage lending by shelving location. So right now we're only managing it by kind of like a building location. And then providing suggested item barcodes when a new request comes in. Is not something that we're doing now. And then I think I skipped the CNY slide, so I'm just going to go back to that one. So these are just some more priorities that have come up. I think that these first ones got mentioned. These have to do with kind of the patron experience and view find. So providing more real-time validation so people will know if, for example, their account's blocked before they even place a request. Patron account features in ViewFind is another big one, letting people see their list of ReShare requests and statuses and potentially, do things like cancel a request. Managing requesting privileges by patron type. Right now, that's still something we haven't quite sorted out. Again, the shared index matching has come up. Editing in-process requests is still a little hairy, and so that's something that we're sorting out. Purging completed requests down the line as they start to build up in the system. And CNY, just some general UX improvements. I think they've been particularly strong on kind of the UX side of things and suggesting a lot there. So this has really been helpful in compiling kind of a short-term feature list of things that we'll need to do for ReShare to really kind of take it to the next level. And then I did also want to mention a few community priorities, and this just gives a sense of things that may not be specific to these users, but that things that we still need to do. Additional ILS integrations is a big one. And I did also just want to mention WMS here in that we do have integrations with WMS, as Michele mentioned, on the lending side, so check-ins and checkouts. And on the borrowing side, we are using their APIs for patron lookup. So the missing piece is really that accept item integration, which is what creates a temporary item record for the borrowing library to use to circulate the item. And we've heard from OCLC that that will be available in the fall. So I guess that's now. So we really should follow up. But the plan is definitely to complete that integration as soon as the functionality is available to us. A couple other ILSs we haven't done yet just because we haven't had a library that needs them, but these are ones we've kind of heard rumblings for Horizon and Polaris. And as we start to look at consortia that have public and school libraries, I'm sure there's going to be other integrations that are going to rise. We also want to keep working on ILL integrations. So improvements to the Iliad app is a big priority. Rapido is one where we've already started to have some conversations with Ex Libris. And so we're kind of moving down the road to that. And then Tapasa is one that we've heard a lot of requests for, but we don't really have a lot of traction on that yet, although we've had a little bit of conversation with OCLC. So that's one I think we'll need to pursue, probably in the coming months. We definitely want to continue to implement the ISO 18626 standard. We've implemented a lot of it, but there are other functions it supports that we haven't done yet. Things like recalls, renewals, and also non-returnables, which is on this list as well and has kind of its own, some of its own sections of the protocol. Shipping is another big one, and controlled digital lending. So as we go down that list, we kind of move from features within the existing system to really big new areas of work, and we'll need to figure out how to prioritize all of that. And so it really does come down to finding this balance between the needs of our active users, the project community, and then prospective implementers, which is something I didn't get into quite as much, but as we start to have new potential implementers on the horizon, they may have features that are important for them to go live, and we'll need to get those into the mix as well. And so we're really in the process of coming up with kind of a newer process that will help us manage all of this, that basically takes a feature request, whether that comes from implementers or from the community. We're going to be funneling that to our product management team, who will be kind of developing a roadmap and scheduling features. And we actually just met today for the first time in a long time. So that process is kind of off and running now. We have our subject matter experts team who can help with requirements analysis. So, some of those enhancement priorities that I mentioned, we'll work with that group of subject matter experts to really understand exactly how those things should work. And then we'll create functional or create specifications that we can hand off to our development team who actually do the work and implement the features. And I imagine we'll be sort of iterating through this cycle for quite a while, creating new roadmaps and just kind of working through things to the extent that we can. And so that's it for me at this point. I'm going to stop sharing and hand this off to Kelly.
Thanks, Kristen. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so I'm just gonna, before we open the floor for questions, I'm gonna wrap things up with some information about how to join the ReShare community, or if your organization is already a member, how you can be more engaged with the community. So throughout this, please continue adding your questions in the Q&A in Zoom, and we'll have plenty of time to go through those and have some discussion at the end. So if your organization is not yet a member, individual libraries, consortia, and commercial service providers can join ReShare. As Kristen was describing, members can influence the development roadmap in a number of ways. So member organizations can designate a voting representative to participate in select events, and they can be elected to the steering committee, which I'll speak a bit more about in a second. Staff of member organizations, and even if they're not the designated voting representative, can join a number of working groups that I'll also speak a bit more about. And they also receive invitations to community events that are not open to the public. So we kind of decide on a case-by-case basis whether to have these community meetings publicly available or just available to member organizations. We typically have them closed to just member organizations. So if you're interested in kind of keeping updated about the ReShare community and being involved in the development of not only the product and the community itself, we really encourage membership. And I've also included a link to what else is included with the membership to Project ReShare on our website. Membership fees or examples of other forms of contributions can also be found at that same link. And we always welcome questions. There's an email to get in touch with us to ask all questions about membership. So if your organization is already a member, you have access to everything I just previously mentioned. And the next few slides apply particularly to you because you can be elected to the steering committee and or join one of the working groups that we have. So ReShare's governance structure consists of a steering committee that charges and oversees a number of working groups. As mentioned previously, the steering committee and its members provide strategic direction regarding the product and the community of ReShare. Thirteen members comprise the steering committee, and internally they elect 5 members to serve officer positions, which make up the executive committee. So the steering committee members serve a 2-year term with an option to renew, and the officer positions are held for 1 year. And I've listed all of our current steering committee members here, as well as the officer positions. In addition to the seated members, the voting members of the steering committee, the chairs of the working groups and others serve as ex officio members at the discretion of the steering committee. So myself, Kristen, and a few other people will attend the steering committee meetings just as representatives of the working groups. At the end of this year, Jill Morris, Kurt Munson, and Brian Lynn will be rolling off the steering committee. I want to thank them for their contributions to the product and the community of ReShare over the past few years. Their contributions have been so valuable and important to the development of ReShare and to getting us to this point of actually having implementation. So I really want to thank them for their contributions over the years. We're currently accepting nominations of voting representatives to be elected to the steering committee. Nominations will close on October 29th. And if you're a voting representative, you should have already received information on how to nominate yourself or others for these open seats. We'll announce the new members and the officers at the next community meeting. So I just want to talk a bit about our working groups. So these focus on a variety of areas and needs as identified by the steering committee. Unlike the steering committee though, anyone from a member organization can join one of these groups. Descriptions of each of these can be found on our website, and I've linked it here. We'll also share it after today's session with the recording. But the first is the subject matter experts team, and Kristen spoke a bit about this, but there's no cap on members of this group, and they're responsible for providing input into the detailed functional requirements and user stories that drive the project. These on-the-ground practitioners help the product owner and developers understand and implement the needs of real users. So if you're interested in joining that team, contact Kristen. Next, we've got the product management team, which Kristen also chairs, along with Kurt Munson, who will be rolling off, but he'll be maintaining his chairship of the product management team. We're looking to add another 1 to 2 members to this group, and this group takes primary responsibility for the internal activities of ReShare's application development. And then I chair the community engagement team, so we're looking to add 2 new members in 2022. We organize and mobilize the Project ReShare community through a number of functions, including new member onboarding, supporting a leadership pipeline, and coordinating with other groups to surface community needs and seek collaborators. So if you're interested in this group, you can feel free to contact me. And then we have also a communication team that's chaired by Lisa Croucher of TRLN. So they're also looking to add 2 new members. They're responsible for developing and implementing a strategy to communicate with libraries, consortium, vendors, and developers about Project ReShare. So there's lots more information about these groups on our website, so please check that out if you're interested in any of these. We'll be sending some more information about how to join these groups in the future to the community email list. That's for members only, that email list. So please keep an eye out for that information, or you can always contact one of the chairs directly if you're interested. And with that, that is all the agenda we had for today. So we're going to open the floor for questions. And I'll just ask my panelists to help me work through a few of these questions. I'll read them aloud for folks. So the first was answered in the Q&A, but I thought it would be helpful just to kind of, for the recording and everyone here, go back through some of the responses. So the 3 ILSs used across the ConnectNY consortium are OCLC, WMS, Ex Libris Alma, and III Sierra. What ILS systems have the most complete integration with ReShare? And Jill, do you want to kind of summarize your response to that?
Sure. Actually, I think Kristen may be better suited to answer the question, but we do have a number of different ILS types, and most of them are fully integrated with ReShare to the extent that the capabilities are there provided by the ILS vendor themselves. So Kristen, do you want to say a little bit more about the various ILS types supported?
Sure. I can try to remember the list. So I think we have 10 ILSs currently supported. And, you know, there are probably a lot of what you would expect. We've got Alma, WMS, Folio, Aleph, Symphony, Koha, TLC, Sierra, Millennium, and I think there's one more. So if anyone can think of one more. Voyager, that's it. Yeah. So it's a pretty good list. I think, you know, especially within academic libraries, it probably covers a lot of libraries. And, you know, in terms of all of those, they're all integrated at the same level, with the exception of, as we mentioned, WMS, which doesn't have the NSIP accept item function. And actually the TLC implementation is still not quite complete, but we're hoping to have that in our next release.
And I just want to add there really quickly that if you are here and thinking about your ILS integrating with ReShare, the integrations that have gone, I think, the smoothest for us have been those that have an OEI PMH feed so that you can easily pipe your records into a shared index, which allows you to be a supplier in the network. Z3950, most systems have that, but that's something to consider as well. And the NSIP functionality that Kristen already mentioned, making sure that all of those various aspects of NSIP are implemented and not just some of them. That's one other thing to just consider as you're looking at various systems, various ILS types. In PALCI, we had NSIP already enabled for all of our EasyBorrow libraries prior to moving to ReShare. So it made that process somewhat easy, I think, in terms of an implementation. But for many ILS providers, that's an add-on that you just have to think about or ask about if it's not something you have available to you today.
And Kristen, could you speak a bit about what institutions and vendors are currently contributing developer time to ReShare?
Sure. So we have a development team, and at the moment we have myself as the product owner and kind of managing the team. And we have 2 developers from IndexData who are both contributing basically full time. So that's Kurt And now we've said Kurt Munson so many times. It's Kurt Nordstrom from IndexData. And then Jason Skomorowski, also from IndexData, are both full-time on the project. And then from KINT, we have contributions from Ian Ibbotson, who's kind of our technical architect and also contributes development kind of here and there when something really falls into his wheelhouse. And then we have Ethan Freestone from KINT, who contributes 1 day a week to ReShare. And so I think we could definitely stand to grow that team. We do have currently one active community contributor, and that's Blake Graham Henderson from the Mobius Consortium, and he's been helping with some DevOps work, helping to try to make the ReShare software easier to deploy for developers. So that would essentially lower the bar for other developers to come in and begin working. And so that has been a really great contribution. We've also had contributions in the past from the Western Carolina Library Consortium from Adam Olson, who's on hiatus right now. He's on parental leave, but we expect him to be back. And then we've had Michele Cernovsky, who was at Lehigh University at the time, really built pretty much all of the NCIP integrations for us. So that was a really wonderful contribution as well. We couldn't have done that without her. And so we're definitely open to the idea of additional development contributors. And that could be, you know, what you think of as a traditional developer who's really doing front end or back end and working in the core software. But I think we've also found that some of these projects that can be a little bit outside of that core platform work well too. You know, when Michele did her NCIP implementation, she built a separate NCIP library that works with ReShare, but also kind of sits outside of ReShare. And so things like that can kind of, you know, maybe don't require you to learn the full sort of ReShare and Folio platform, I think work well. So if people have an interest, especially ReShare project members, you know, we'd love to talk to people more about opportunities to participate in development.
And we've also had a few other, it's not necessarily specifically development, but we've had some member contributions related to kind of assessing accessibility, compliance with ReShare, and that's some early work we've done. And I'm trying to think if there's some other ones that come to mind, but we're very open to different forms of contribution for members, especially if there's a particular expertise that your staff have that you'd like to contribute. We're always open to hearing about those ideas. So the next question was, how often are records updated from local ILS platforms to the ReShare system?
I can take that one. So it really can vary depending on the school and your needs and capabilities. So as Jill mentioned, for the ILSs that support OAI PMH, that's really been the most seamless workflow. And for those libraries, we can update records daily. So every day we just kind of go in and check what new records have been added to the feed and they come right in. So that's a very kind of low touch process. For the libraries that don't have OAI PMH, we've just been using FTP. So libraries can put a file on an FTP site, whether they do that manually or automate it is up to them. And for those libraries, we're really just kind of letting them dictate their own schedule in terms of what, you know, if they're doing it manually, maybe monthly or even quarterly, we have some people looking at that type of schedule, and others are still doing daily or weekly. So there's really a lot of flexibility, and we use a harvesting tool that we can just set up to schedule to check for your records on whatever schedule you want. So at least for IndexData and the way that we're doing things, it's really customizable.
And then Kristen, I think this is also for you. Can you talk a little bit about the plan for non-returnables?
Sure. So, I mean, at the moment, the plan is fairly high level. If you go to the Project ReShare website and look under, I think it's the product menu at the top, there is a page for non-returnables. And back probably over a year ago now, the product management team did write kind of a high level functional document describing how we'd like non-returnables to work. And so that is on the website and people are welcome to read that. So I think we have kind of a general idea of the, the structure and the high level features that we would need to implement. I think the fact that we've implemented returnables already gets us a lot, in that we already have a UI, we already have records, and we already have messaging. So it's a matter of just kind of taking our process and figuring out what needs to be tweaked and added to support non-returnables. I do think a big component of that is also dealing with serials and e-resources. So since we're lending primarily monographs right now, we have not really worried about serials holding statements. And so that's something that we either need to accommodate in our shared index or potentially have a different mechanism of capturing that information. So that'll be a big part of that project. But at the moment, we don't have a firm plan for when that work will begin. And that's something that our newly reformed product management team will be thinking about. We're going to be actually, as a team, doing a pretty thorough review of our backlog and trying to sort out, we're going to probably have groups or work packages of issues that have come out of the implementers' needs. And then we'll have packages of issues that will be around implementing new things like non-returnables or shipping. And I think we'll be working within that group and then working with the steering committee to kind of schedule out, how much do we need to do to make sure that implementers are stable and having kind of a good daily experience. And then at some point, I'm hopeful that things will become stable enough with what we're doing now that we can make a shift to kind of a larger new project.
And I guess I have my own follow-up for Jill and Pam and maybe Maureen and Michele and Liz about if non-returnables have come up in your internal conversations about implementing ReShare and how important that'll be for y'all.
Yeah, it definitely comes up here frequently. I think our institutions are, many of them have other solutions in place, but they are looking for opportunities to work within our community more closely and to try and solve the non-returnables question as well. And the other thing that's come up very frequently is controlled digital lending. And that's sort of related in certain respects to a non-returnables kind of workflow anyway, in terms of lending digital items. So we are thinking about that a lot as well. And I could see, ReShare and the roadmap itself, as we move along and move through the process of stabilizing the returnables product in these current implementations and making sure that it's a really good experience for many institutions. These other sort of projects are coming along quickly, and I think we're actively interested in hearing from the community more broadly about who's interested in this and who might participate in helping to resource it as well, because obviously this is a community project and requires community resources that are limited. So we are really interested, I think, in hearing from folks who are here today about what they would like to see too.
Our group is interested in non-returnables and CDL. Definitely.
Well, I don't have any other questions. Maybe I'll give people just a minute or two more to put in the end. But I guess while we're waiting, I don't know if any of our speakers have anything else to chime in on before we wrap up things today. If not, I think we can wrap up things a bit early. People get to reclaim 10 minutes of their day. Thank you all so much for joining today. We will have a recording of this sent to anyone who registered for this webinar. We'll also share that information with the community list and the news list as well. It'll also be posted on our website. I want to thank all of the panelists here for sharing information today and thank everyone else for attending. So have a great afternoon and we'll wrap at that. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kelly.